But don't you worry. It's all normal. I'm telling you, everybody's doing it. And besides, your employer likes it real well. The government loves it. And the financial world recommends it highly. It's their favorite choice. So what do you say? Doesn't that sound like a great deal? I think it sounds like a fantastic deal. Are you in?
Absolutely not. When you put it like that, it sounds insane.
Welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we rethink money, ditch the system, and rediscover what it means to truly thrive well. I'm Tricia Miller, mom of 7, financial coach, and founder of ThriveWell. Around here, we believe wealth is more than numbers. It's about freedom, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts. If you're ready to challenge the norm and take back control of your financial life, you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast. I'm Tricia Miller and I'm here today with my son Jonathan as we continue our Becoming Your Own Banker series. And Jonathan, this should be a fun one for us. And admittedly, it might be a little bit controversial for some folks, at least at first blush. But I do want to encourage our listeners, if you can hang with us for a little bit and keep an open mind, you might just walk away with a totally new perspective and, more importantly, some hope. Because I believe there is truly a better way to manage our financial affairs, and that is what ultimately Nelson Nash is trying to do. Jonathan, I'm so glad you were able to be with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here with you today as well. I saw that last time that you and Kimberly had started talking about Willie Sutton and Willie Sutton's law. I know he was a bank robber who supposedly had said that he was robbing banks because that's where the money was. I thought Nelson was really trying to get at some key important points.
Yes, he definitely was. And of course, he introduced us to Willie Sutton, but he did that specifically to illustrate the main point, which was that wherever wealth accumulates, someone will try to steal it. And sometimes that is the obvious thief that we expect, but other times it's less obvious, and it can be banks or Wall Street. But Nelson's biggest focus in this chapter is the IRS and the tax system. Even more insidiously, he talks about how the whole thing has been made perfectly legal because the rules have been written to make it legal, which is why Nelson brought up Frederick Bastiat and legal plunder. It's this idea that something can be morally wrong in principle, but still have the force of law behind it, which is really the problem. It's the law perverted. So that's kind of where we've been. But today we're going to pick up on the second half of Willie Sutton's law. And I do want to say something before we dive in. I want to make it very clear from the start that I am not here giving tax advice or investment advice. We're not telling anyone what to do with their 401k, their IRA, or any other qualified plan. So please do not listen to one podcast and go out and make a rash or emotional financial decision. Nevertheless, I do want to encourage you to do your own due diligence. Don't outsource your own thinking. Educate yourself. This particular section of Nelson's book might be the most difficult for some people to consider because Nelson, he does not mince words. He declares the IRS to be the biggest thief in the world. Later, he calls the government a parasite. And finally, he likens the government to the fox guarding the chicken house. None of those descriptions are exactly complimentary. So if you don't hold these opinions, it can be challenging. But again, I'm going to ask you to keep an open mind. And if at the end of the day, you don't agree, that's okay. We can still be friends. But I hope that you will see that Nelson isn't asking us just to rethink our thinking slightly. He's actually asking us to make a complete about face. He's suggesting that the entire system is the problem. And until we get out of that system or declare our freedom from that system, we're going to remain in a debt slave construct. So I am not going to soften Nelson's words here because I think if we do, we inadvertently miss his point. He is sending up warning flags and he is sounding the alarm loudly. He's really just trying to help people to be free. So it might make us a little bit uncomfortable. But if you can follow his reasoning, you might just find yourself wide awake and gaining some freedom that you never thought possible. So we're going to pick right back up where Nelson says that the government is a parasite. and lives off of the productive taxpayers, the host. Think about a parasite for a minute. It doesn't help the host to flourish, does it?
No.
It feeds on the host. It draws life from the host. And if it continues unchecked, it will actually eventually destroy the host. We need to sit with that for a minute. Nelson is saying that's what the government is doing. So do you have any thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, like you said, not really mincing words at all. It's creating a pretty vivid picture there. It's pretty much the idea that we're being robbed. It's not the idea of, contributing to the common good. As we're being taken advantage of, we're being duped. A parasite is aggressive and the host is typically kind of passive in that relationship. And maybe even they're unaware of what's going on, that their life is literally being drained from them. Sometimes I know there's like those worms in a bear's stomach or whatever. They have no idea. They keep eating, but they literally can't keep
Can't get
anything
any
in them
sustenance.
because they're getting it all taken away from them. Correct. So it's quite a picture, and I can understand how that might make a lot of people feel, but we really haven't stopped to think about it in that kind of way.
He's challenging the whole framework and saying that we've been conditioned to trust these systems that just are not trustworthy. They're not designed for our freedom. I want to pick up with what he actually says here in the text. He says, it is self-evident that if the parasite takes all the produce of the host, then both parties die. And he puts 2 exclamation points at the end of this sentence. Then he continues, government officials may be cunning, but they're not stupid. Notice he says it right there. They are cunning. That's the sly fox image that's coming up here. When taxation becomes onerous to the point where government officials sense rebellion, they always resort to exceptions to the rule. They invented qualified pension plans, HR 10 plans, 401k plans, IRAs, etc. ad nauseum, he says. What a classic case of the fox guarding the chicken house. How absurd. And then he ends that with another exclamation point. And now, obviously, we no longer have Nelson speaking to us live, and we can't hear his voice. But the way he is writing this, italicizing certain words, putting double exclamation points at times, he is trying to get our attention. It's like he's jumping up and down, hollering, waving the red flags. Hey, people, listen to what I'm saying here. And yet all these government-approved retirement structures, we have been led to believe these are the holy grail of financial planning. I mean, let's be honest. People brag about their 401ks and their IRAs. They're so proud of what they have managed to put into these plans. And to the degree that they've worked hard and they've kept plugging along, yes, they should be proud of that. But here Nelson is saying, how totally absurd. I mean, do you think the perspective could possibly be 180 out from the average Joe today?
Yeah, a little bit. He's definitely challenging that idea that this is the best thing that it's ever been. There's the best thing since sliced bread. So if you see it kind of in the way he's expressing it with the fox guarding the chicken house, it's kind of how absurd can you be to trust your predator to essentially guard you, right? Haven't we learned our lesson? But the fox is sly and cunning, so.
Yes, he is. I think we might do well to remember the fox and the little red hen fairy tales we heard as children. Here's the hen just minding her business, and the fox is just circling around the hen house. It's the predator and the prey that's inviting certain disaster. The fox's only interest in the chickens is that he wants a good dinner. Like, let that simple fact sink in. He will wait for it. He will be sly and cunning to get it. He'll do whatever it takes. Meanwhile, he's going to try to build trust with the chickens. So how does this play out? Let's look at what Nelson has to say. Jonathan, would you mind reading the very last sentence on page 29 and continue through until about halfway into the paragraph on the next page?
Sure. Did you also notice that all these plans were not installed simultaneously? First, it was pension plans, which blessed one select group of citizens, and then HR 10 plans for another group, etc. Finally, it came down to IRAs so that everyone has an exception to the rule. Can you believe it? The lawmakers create a problem by spending money that they do not have, which results in strangling taxation, and then they create a solution in the form of an exception to the rules they created. The natural result of such a process is a system in which the government controls everything you do, and they can and will change their mind upon the slightest whim of the time. And they keep changing the rules so that it looks like they are trying to help you out. The real solution is to quit the government spending for all the programs and get out of the lives of the citizens.
So he mentions in the beginning there that all of these plans were not installed simultaneously. Why do you think that is?
Probably just to kind of sprinkle it out there, not give you all of it all at once, like a little bit here, a little bit there. So you get your first group of people, we'll get them done out of the way, and then you get another one. And yeah, so that way I think it's kind of like, well, they got an exception to the rules, so now I want one. I'm not really sure though.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're hitting on it. If I hand a cookie to one child and the other child sees it, what happens?
The other kid's going to beg for a cookie.
That's right, because it's like, wait a minute, you gave them something special. It even says here, he's got it in quotes, blessed. They were blessed with being that one select group, right? So again, he's saying the government officials are cunning. They're not stupid. They knew that if they gave a special break to one small group to start, it would make that plan more desirable to the next group until everyone has an exception. And these plans also act as a relief valve for the burden of taxation. So by rolling it out a little bit over time, everyone gets the sense that the government has given them something special. And Nelson comments, can you believe it? You can just see he's just like, oh my goodness, people, wake up, think about what you're doing here.
There's no sarcasm in this section.
None at all, right? The lawmakers, he's saying, they've created this problem by spending money that they do not have, which results in strangling taxation to the people. So then they, the ones who created the problem, they go and create the solution in the form of an exception to the rules that they created, and yet we praise them for it. So here we are. Is it any wonder that this chapter is not very comfortable for most of us? We aren't looking like we're very wise at this point, are we? In fact, I love how David Stearns, his son-in-law, he actually says something very similar to this, but he put it in the form of a question. And it's on page 85 in the book. It's number 4. This is under points to consider. He says, when government creates a problem, onerous taxation, and then turns around and grants you an exception to the problem that they created, any tax qualified plan, aren't you just a little bit suspicious that you're being manipulated? Well, aren't you? Shouldn't we be? That's the question. It's like, wake up, little red hen. The fox is trying to outsmart you.
So how are we supposed to outsmart this fox?
I think it has to start with awareness. It's not just what we think we know. It's what we think we know that just ain't so. I think I've heard it said that is really the problem. And so over and over, Nelson is trying to show us that we must rethink our thinking. And he also is famous for saying, when we know what is happening, we'll know what to do. I want to play a little game of pretend with you for just a minute, because I think it will help to make the point. So let's pretend that you're standing on a busy street corner. People are rushing past you. The cars are honking. The light changes. Everybody else seems to know where they're going. And then out of nowhere, a complete stranger walks up to you. He's wearing a sharp designer suit. But if you look closely, the cuffs are a little bit frayed. He has a big, flashy gold watch on his wrist. His hair is slicked back, and he reeks of cologne. His smile feels a little bit more hungry than friendly, and he steps just a little too close, claps his heavy hand on your shoulder. He looks you dead in the eye, and he says, "Hey, kid, I got a deal for you. Here's how it works. I'm going to take a piece of every paycheck that you earned for the next 40 years of your life. Now, don't you worry, son. I'm not taking it for me. I'm going to invest it for you in things you may or may not understand, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. Now, you're not going to be able to touch this money until I say so, but it's okay. Trust me, it's for your own good. You don't want to mess this up. You might make a bad decision, and we certainly don't want that. Now, I'll warn you, because I care about you. If you do try to touch it early, you're going to have to give me my cut right away. Plus, there'll be another penalty on top of that. But you hang in there, son. It's worth it. Now, I want to make sure you understand this. You're going to take all the risk. Your money, it might go up. It might go down. You're going to open your statement in 1 month, and sometimes you're going to feel great about it. Another time, you might feel sick to your stomach. But don't you worry. Over time, it should be just fine. That's what they tell me anyway. And by the way, you're going to pay all the fees too. I appreciate that so much about you. Then one day, when you finally want your money back, I'm going to tell you how much you can take and when you can take it. In fact, eventually, I'm going to require you to take it. And if you don't take it out when I say so, there might be another penalty for that too. And when you finally do start taking the money, then I'm really going to take my cut, because that's when the getting's good. Now, I don't know exactly how big my cut's going to be yet. We're going to figure that out later, okay? Because the rules, they can change. That's just the way it works, son. But don't you worry. It's all normal. I'm telling you, everybody's doing it. And besides, your employer likes it real well, the government loves it, and the financial world recommends it highly. It's their favorite choice. So what do you say? Doesn't that sound like a great deal? I think it sounds like a fantastic deal. Are you in?
Absolutely not. You make a great 1950s mobster, though. I'll tell you that. No, when you put it like that, it sounds insane.
So you'd probably back away slowly, hold one hand on your wallet, and wonder why this man is allowed to walk around unsupervised. Truth be told, right? But when your HR department says it in a benefits meeting, and your financial planner, he's got that license and all, suddenly it sounds like the best part of wisdom. Why is that?
It's how it's presented to you. The packaging is different. It's what everybody's doing. I thought peer pressure was just from middle school.
Welcome to the fact that all of life is middle school. Besides, what else would you do? I think that's part of the problem. How are you going to possibly retire if you don't do it that way? Most of us can't even imagine. We weren't taught rich dad, poor dad, or cash flow quadrant in school. We weren't taught becoming your own banker or the richest man in Babylon.
No, we weren't.
So back to the deal that I offered you on the street. Let's talk about how it's actually sold to you in real life or described to you by your HR department. I'm curious. Tell me how it was described to you as a young person going into your first job.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how my HR meeting went, but my first week was like an onboarding kind of week. And the first day was basically an entire 8-hour day of sessions with HR where they walked us through different things. And one section was on all of our benefits and packages. And the 401k obviously was just described as a no-brainer, like as an obvious, like, oh, it's just, this is what you're going to do. Yep, you're automatically enrolled. We recommend that you put your company match in bare minimum, but we'd encourage you to put in as much as possible, that kind of thing. I think if I remember right, said something like, oh, as young professionals, you should try and put in closer to 10 or 15, like it's your savings. I know that they definitely call it a retirement savings plan. I get these emails periodically that say, like, we're changing the rules or the whatever benefits of your retirement savings plan. So yeah, it does sound a lot more innocent and responsible than your street deal, but we've talked about the importance of words before, and I think it would be more honest to say something along the lines of like, I'm actually investing for retirement, which we have said before. It's not saving. Those are very different things. You're putting it at market risk through a government qualified approved plan. It's restricting your money for the next 40 years, and it's going to, like I said, expose it to market risk, charges you all the fees. It's going to delay your taxation from the seed until the harvest. We don't know what the rate's going to be. Taxes just seem to continually go up. And we've talked about the importance of ownership and control, and you're giving that all over to somebody else.
Just the fact that they call it a workplace savings account, you're right, like that language, that makes it sound very safe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. They really probably didn't go through all of the details as far as not being able to touch it until a certain time, or what would happen if you did need money. What's all the fine print? Let's put it that way.
And to give them the benefit of all the doubts, and retirement savings plan is what they say. But Yeah, I don't remember exactly all of it verbatim, but I do just remember them talking about how we specifically use a moderate investing strategy, one with moderate risk to reward ratio, and that it was safe. And that I can't remember. I think they probably give that example of, at 8 to 10% return over 40 years. If you put in X amount of money, here's the amount of money you're going to have afterwards. So, you saw all those graphics, but no, I definitely think we weren't walked through like, okay, here's, the fees you're going to get charged. Here's how it actually works. Here's the rules for accessing this money and all those things. I definitely think we just kind of looked at the benefits and maybe brushed over the rules or something, but then kind of carried on.
Okay, so a couple things there that you mentioned. I just want to define the difference between savings and investing. So savings, for one, should be accessible. It should be stable, and it should be dependable. It's money that you want available when an opportunity arises or an emergency shows up. You're not trying to beat the market with your savings. You're trying to keep control of your money. That is the whole point of savings. Investing, just to define that, involves giving up some measure of control. It involves giving up certainty or liquidity in exchange for the possibility of greater growth. And there is nothing wrong with investments or savings. But to call our investments an actual savings account is a bit of sleight of hand there, in my opinion, because investments can go up, but they can also go down. It's recognizing the distinction between two concepts and not confusing one with the other. And then, of course, we get sold on the average rate of return. And I don't want to go into that too much on this particular episode, maybe another time. But the average rate of return is not the same thing as the actual rate of return, what is actually happening with your dollars. There's lots of issues with the way that these things are presented.
And I also just thought back, and they did mention in that onboarding process, our company's 4% match, and don't miss out on the extra money. It's free money. That 4% is a great match. They really emphasize that too, that compared to other companies, that was great. And I remember that I came home that evening and somewhat naively, I had asked you, I was like, hey, should I be at least taking advantage of this company match? Like, that's free money, right? Like, shouldn't I at least put my 4% in, get that 4%? I'd be diversifying my own investments, and I, of course, look at it as an investment rather than savings. But I think I actually asked you that. And you'd think I'd have learned a little bit to be slightly more skeptical and not just be like, this incentive sounds great. But I'm a little more hesitant now to give up my control. But I do remember that.
So I'm curious, Jonathan, did you get any pushback from your HR department when you did choose to opt out?
Honestly, not really. I think there was just like an "are you sure?" and definitely a conversation amongst like even my own peers that I had onboarded with, because I was part of a class of onboarded associates. And as you're kind of hanging out on break or whatever, you're talking about the benefits, since we all just sat down for 2 hours to talk about it. And I was like, I'm opting out. So you kind of deal with that little bit of social aspect of it. But we do also have these small team meetings monthly with my peers and my direct boss. And I think a couple of times now it has been her financial tip of the month, which I do appreciate that she wants to share that with us. But, that we should be maximizing our 401k, taking advantage of our company match, etc. And I think I had also once explained in that same group that I had opted out as well. And a little bit of surprise, a little bit of questioning. And then on another separate occasion, I don't even remember exactly how it came up, but it came up that I had a whole life insurance policy, and it kind of perked her ears up, and it was on her face a little bit like, huh? Like, what exactly? And, I was actually kind of surprised, because she just had a quick kind of normal retort, which was that, term's cheaper. Why do you have a whole life insurance policy? You could just buy term and invest the difference.
Yeah.
And I could just tell she had a certain perception quite quickly. So I didn't really argue with her. It didn't feel like the time and place. But, I said that, hey, I know the arguments for it. I know what's against it. And, it has been a wonderful tool in my life. It's helped me with purchasing a car, paying off debt. And why wouldn't I want to store my wealth somewhere where it's contractually obligated to grow while I also still can actually use it? And I kind of just gave her some examples.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what people don't understand. But it is interesting that a place where it's safe, where you have actual access and guaranteed growth by contract, can get labeled as like, why would you do that? That's too expensive, And instead, putting your money at risk where you can't touch it is somehow considered responsible. That seems a little upside down. But anyways, I'm glad it wasn't too hard for you, but I know the pressure is still real nonetheless,
It's still I don't like to use the word courage for something that doesn't feel like it has to be courageous, but yeah, sometimes it's sticking out, being the odd one out, the black sheep, so to speak, and just to do something that's outside of the norm. And you kind of get why people just go along with it. It's easier to just be like, yep, okay, I'm down to do that. You don't really have to explain yourself or defend your actions or decisions. And at least for my side of things, enrollment was automatic. I had to opt out.
Which is different than from in my day. You actually had to opt in. So that has definitely changed, which I suppose that's easier for them. Not sure that it makes it easier for you, but definitely compliance to the system that feels responsible, and questioning things can be seen as foolish. And I will say some of my clients have experienced this when they go to their financial advisor, maybe somebody who's been overseeing what they're doing, or even their CPA. And they say, hey, we've decided to make a different decision. We're going to put our money over here. And it's like, what are you doing? And that's when you really realize that the whole culture has been built to direct your paycheck into a very specific system. And that can be a little bit awkward.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that very similar situation. Every time I get in line at TSA, they've got the new facial scanning recognition technology right there. And you just step up and they're saying, hey, take your photo. And I'm like, hey, no, thank you. I appreciate it. And everyone kind of looks around, or the TSA agent goes, are you sure? And I'm like, yep, I'm okay. And you can do that.
Yes. And that's funny in that situation because everybody's in a line.
Yeah, come on, just get us through, man. Why do you got to do anything? Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Don't stop the system, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, but it's important. People need to realize that even with that or whatever, that you have a choice. It requires thinking a little differently and maybe having a little bit of courage to buck the system a bit, but some good questions to always ask, especially when it comes to our financial world, is who's controlling the access to my money? You earned it. You worked hard for it. Who has the access to it? And what happens if I do need it early? What happens if the tax laws change? And what's sad to me is that people will interrogate whole life insurance like a hostile witness. And I think that's just because they've got this idea in their mind most of the time, oh, whole life is awful, it's a scam. But they will hand over decades of payroll contributions to Wall Street and the government with almost no questions at all. And that should tell us something.
Yeah, and Wall Street just has a perfectly clean record, of course. So
yes.
No manipulation or anything, wrong going on there ever.
They definitely have your best interest in mind, I'm sure.
Yeah. So let's walk through all of this. One of the biggest things I have heard, and that I even actually asked you about specifically, that you don't want the company match at least. Like, why would you give up this free money? And this one I know I personally have struggled with a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You mentioned this and we kind of brushed past that, but you're right. That 4% company match that you had, and that is the sacred cow. It really is. I mean, it's free money after all. Why would you give up free money?
Is it free?
So the question really is it really free money?
It was presented to me that way, and actually verbatim, those are the words used, is don't miss out on the free money. Heard that more than once. I suppose it's free in my mind in the sense that it's 4%, that if I was going to go do it anyways, it was 4% more than I would have had in the first place, and it's not my own money being put in. But the exchange there is that I am now obligated to put in 4% of my own money to get said free money. So is it really free? Because there is something on my end that I'm giving in exchange or incentive to lock in more of my own money.
Yes, you do have to pay the 4% and it is locked up. But I want to challenge the thinking that it's actually more than that, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. I'll say that the rest of my life. Okay. For an employer, the match is just part of your total compensation package. Companies look at the bottom line. They have to. They're in business to make money. So if they're giving you a match, that has already been figured into the cost of hiring you. So if they didn't offer you the match, they could have offered you a higher wage or a bonus, but they don't, because so many people are now conditioned to this idea that it's a benefit. It's an enticement to you, the employee. So if they want to be competitive with other companies and everyone out there is thinking that this match is the thing to do, then they're going to sell you on their match in order to get you to work with them. And frankly, it often does work out in their best interest because they can attach strings to it. Again, is it really free? So what they can do is they can have these employer contributions that come along with vesting rules. Some require you to stay employed for a certain amount of time before that money fully belongs to you. So that's a benefit to the employer, not you, the employer, because now you don't want to go look for a job somewhere else. In fact, you might stay there even if someone was offering you more money because you're going to have to give up this money now if you leave too soon. So that 401k with a match can act as a really good set of golden handcuffs. But even if the match is fully vested, the account is still inside of this government qualified structure. And you're not free to touch your own money. So you're basically walking through your entire financial life, possibly missing out on opportunities, unable to handle emergencies. You've basically got one hand tied, maybe two hands tied behind your back financially. So I think a better question isn't just how much did they match you and then compare that. No, it's what rules did you have to agree to in order to get that match?
Yeah, it's just not how we're trained to think about it.
No, we definitely aren't. We're trained to think, is this company offering me 4 and this one offering me 6? Instead of thinking about the loss of control. And it's a big picture loss of control. So it's more than just this little bit of money that I may or may not receive from them.
I know the other thing that people talk about is the actual deferral, though, of the taxes themselves.
Yeah, and that is huge for sure. So the government basically says with these approved plans, put your money here and we'll let you defer the tax. But I think we need to be very clear because, in fact, oftentimes people don't even use that language, defer the tax. They talk about get a tax deduction.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just thinking about today and they're thinking that that is like eliminating some taxes for them. But it's not actually elimination. It's just postponement. In fact, the postponement is like an IOU with a blank tax rate to be filled in later. If you remember our guy on the street, he says, don't worry about it. We'll figure out how much that's going to be later on. And essentially, that's what's happening. We don't know what the tax rates are going to be in the future. You also don't know what your income situation is going to be. Most people are planning to be poor. Why would you do that? That's not the goal. And you also don't know what president, what Congress is going to change. The future is unknown. So when someone says to me, but I saved taxes, I want to say, did you save them? Really? Or did you just postpone them for an unknown day at an unknown rate? It's not the same thing. We don't think long term.
Yeah, and that connects us back to that seed and harvest idea that we touched on earlier. If I pay the taxes on the seed today, yeah, it might stink today, but that's smaller. But if I defer it on the seed and, wait, then the government's going to be taxing the harvest when there should be, like you said, a lot more. We're not planning to be poorer. Do we really think in general that we see all this outrageous government spending? Do we think taxes are really going to go down? Personally, not willing to bank on that. So, yeah,
No.
Don't see that happening.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. And we could talk about other things here, but regardless, I want to share with you a real life story because I think this is so much more important. So late last year, a couple came to me, and obviously I'll keep these details private, but they were in their early 50s, maybe just 50. They had good income. They were very responsible people. They had done all the things that they were supposed to do. And yet, when I got on the Zoom call, the wife was in tears. I mean, she was ready to give up. She was so frustrated. And that's exactly what she said to me. She said, we've done everything right, Tricia. We did what we were told to do, and we still feel broke. So I was like, I'm so sorry. Let's take a look at your financials. So we did. And when I looked at their financial picture after the way she was so upset, they weren't actually broke. They had money. In fact, they had quite a bit of it, really. The problem was it was all tied up in their 401k plans and their 529 plans for their kids. They had access to almost none of it. They had sold a home. They paid off debt because that's what they're told to do. So now they're renting. Now they're in their 50s. and they wanted to buy another house, but they didn't even have the liquidity for a down payment. And this is the part that really hit me because this couple had good income on anybody's standards. And I'll be really transparent here. They had much more than I make, but I had more freedom. I didn't have as much money on paper, but I had access to capital. And that is so important. If an opportunity came up, I could take the opportunity. I could go do what they could not do. They had little to no liquidity. They had done all of this responsible thing that we're told to do by putting all their money into 401k, but they were boxed in. And I have to be honest, when I saw this, it really opened my eyes even more.
Yeah, it's a really different way to define broke.
Yeah, because we usually think broke means no money, but it can mean no liquidity or no access to money when you need it and not being in control. So you can have money somewhere and still be unable to use it for the life that's right in front of you. And the sad part is that this family couldn't even take their kids on a family vacation without incredible stress. And that may sound like a small thing, but it's not. Those years are limited. And when you're young like you are and you're working, you're not thinking about that when you're automatically enrolled in this 401k because you're not in that stage of life yet, right? But when you start to be where this couple is and they're realizing, hey, wait a minute, our kids are in high school. We don't have a lot of time left with them and we can't even take them on vacation. You don't get those years back. And this is where I get emotional because this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about freedom, freedom to live your life in a way that matters. It's about being able to make memories. Truly, what good is money if you can never spend it until life has passed you by? What's the point? You can't take it with you. Here's another thing. It's about an opportunity. What if having some liquidity meant you could also use those dollars to buy a rental property or to start a business, to follow the dream you've always wanted to follow, to create cash flow, and it buys you freedom from your 9-to-5. Those are things that are so intangible, but in real life, they're really important. This is why, I don't want to say it to sound cliche, but this is why I named my business Thrive Well, because I want people to thrive well throughout their lifetime, not just wait till one day, someday. So back to the company match. You get your company match, but then your financial life is locked up in these government-approved accounts that you cannot access. So again, free money.
Yeah, when they're talking about free money or tax deferral, there's a lot more of what it can actually cost you.
Yeah, and that to me is the biggest, most expensive reality. It's more than dollars on the page. It's costing you life, like really important life.
Yeah, no, I really haven't ever thought about it that way.
Most people don't until later in life when all of a sudden they realize it. And sometimes we're looking at it with regret looking back. But I do want to say back to my couple, because there is a really great part to their story. They actually became their own banker. And I got to tell you, they were nervous. All right. They were very nervous. They wondered, how in the world are we going to pay that kind of premium, Tricia? We can't afford to do anything. But they started, and they started building capital differently. And guess what? They gained access to their money, and it's still growing. And this spring, so I think they called me back last September, October. And this spring, they took their kids to Disney. And I got to see the pictures, and I can't even tell you. I'm welling up with tears just saying this to you, how happy I was for them. It literally made me cry because this family is getting their life back. And when I saw them one other time this spring, they just oh my gosh, Tricia, you have no idea. Thank you so much. This is why I do what I do. It really kind of takes me back to my story of my older brother. I watched him live for one day someday. And he passed away the year he retired, and he never got to enjoy it. We've got to manage our money in a better way. Our money, it needs to be available for the life that God has put in front of us right now. There's a place for saving for the future, but there's also living today. And that's the beautiful thing about the infinite banking concept. You get to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's incredible. That's so fast of a turnaround too. It's just, changing just little things, right? But you say 401k, restricts access. People could think that's just fine because it's for my retirement. It's just we talked about often the responsibility aspect of it. And it kind of actually made me realize that responsibility could be very easily interchanged with ownership. We can't really be responsible or own ourselves. So it's better to just lock it in and give somebody else that responsibility and that ownership for it, right? But when you kind of tell a story like that, it really changes perspective. They had money and they couldn't use it. They couldn't buy a house. They couldn't take a vacation with their kids before they go off to college. And then there's all the money going to that, right? And it's awesome to hear how fast their life has changed.
If you're going to become your own banker, there is a place for capitalizing over time. That's really important. But it's amazing how just simply changing and directing where those dollars go can really make a difference in the liquidity that you have rather quickly. And in this case, yes, that was absolutely true. I don't want you to miss another point, though, because I think this is important as I was thinking about this. Here's the spending pattern that these qualified plans get us into when our money's locked up. We're putting all our money in here and we can't access those dollars. And you're talking about ownership. And that's exactly where Nelson is going with this. But here's what happens. So we put the money in there trying to be responsible, and then life happens and an emergency shows up. Or you decide you really need to take that family vacation, that is really important, right? Well, now guess what we have to do? We're forced to pull out a credit card to meet that need or to take that vacation. So now, even if you're making this proverbial 8 to 10% return in the market, and that's assuming that it's all sunshine and rainbows like they tell you, now you're using a credit card, paying a much greater interest to a third-party bank to make up for what you cannot access. That's working in the bank's favor now, too. You're doing a great job of keeping the wheels of the banking business in motion. So do you see that Wall Street benefits because all the money's coming into Wall Street? The government benefits because it's getting a really good savings account waiting on that harvest to grow so they can take their cut. And now the banks benefit too. When do you get to benefit from all that hard work and all the money you're setting aside? It's like you're taking one step forward and 3 steps backward. Well, I got news for you. You're never getting ahead when that's the case. But if instead, this is what you were talking about, you become the bank owner, you have ownership, and you now are in control, and you have access to capital, and you can finance that need because you're in control. You can recapture all that lost interest that was going to those banks. If you could do that, you wouldn't even need that high rate of return that you're chasing so hard and that you're risking so much to obtain. If you can wrap your head around that, you can see why Nelson is giving us such a completely different way of seeing money. Because access and control is such a big deal.
Yeah. Bottom line really does seem to be that if I have to ask permission, if I have to wait until I'm a certain age, if I have to prove I'm going through some kind of hardship, I got to pay a penalty or accept whatever the tax rate or code might be at some certain time, I do not have full control of my money. And if I don't have full control, should really not be calling it any kind of freedom. It's not financial freedom. And this couple you talked about, they were really responsible and followed conventional wisdom, but those rules ended up putting them in a bit of a liquidity crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what's happening every day to couples all across the country. And I want people to hear that without shame, because so many people are in that position. They did exactly what they were told. They were obedient to the system. And then they discover that the system didn't really give them freedom. And to me, it's just sad, but it's not something you need to be ashamed of. But when you hear about it and you learn about it, it might be time to take a different step.
So circle this back to Willie Sutton. Where is the money at and who's benefiting from all this?
Follow the money, as they say. So the employee gets the tax deferral, although they think they got a tax deduction, so they're happy for the year, right? The employer is also getting a deduction for participation in those plans. Wall Street is getting a whole load of money coming their way, and they get lots of fees for that. Uncle Sam benefits because he's waiting for the harvest. He's the sly fox sitting on the side, just waiting, biding his time. And of course, the banks, they also get the business when people don't have access to money. So you can see it's quite the deal, but I'm afraid it's not a deal for you. because everybody at that table has an interest in your accumulating wealth. They want a piece of your pie. Takes us right back to Willie Sutton's law. Wherever money is going to accumulate, someone will want to steal it. And I think there's a lot of someones out there. So if you don't understand what's really happening, you won't realize this. But when you do, you'll know what to do.
Yeah, and I know this kind of applies back to my HR situation too, that everybody wants you to benefit. In general, everybody involved is sincere, good people most of the time, but this system is just built to kind of move you in a certain direction.
Absolutely. Let's be clear on that. This is not saying that your HR person, your local banker even, they can be wonderful people. And the structure is still against you. That's the thing. Most of them are not villains. They're trained inside the same system that they're recommending. They're participating in it themselves. They sincerely believe they're helping you. And in some ways, they may be. The system as we know it, it allows you to set it and forget it. This is where the infinite banking concept may not be for everyone. I've said this before. If you do not know how to save a dime any other way, you can't conquer Parkinson's law. You might be better off sticking with your 401k because at least it's something. But you can do so much better. And Nelson is trying to teach you a way that can give you true freedom. Now, that freedom, it does require responsibility. It requires discipline and stewardship. It all really depends on you and your human behavior. Can you conquer Parkinson's law? Now, back to the sincerity of your HR person. That does not make the system safe just because they're kind and have good intentions. And by the way, this is true about financial planners too. I want to note something here on page 30 at the end of the first paragraph because it was just where we left off. It says, but at every turn you see financial planners and writers that label themselves as various kinds of financial experts who without exception recommend that you should participate to the fullest extent possible in your tax sheltered programs. Just note, these financial planners, without exception, they all give the same advice, is what Nelson's saying. Why?
Well, we only know what we've been taught, and they're all qualified by the same licenses, systems, educations.
You're right. They prop up the system. So if you go to a financial planner, you can know in advance what advice you're going to get before you get there. But if you become your own banker and then you go to your CPA or your financial planner, they're going to start questioning what you're doing because it's outside of the system that they know. Don't be surprised. They're going to try to pull you back into the system. That's what they think is best. And I have had it happen to some of my own clients. They get started in the infinite banking concept. They're building capital. It is not a get-rich-quick overnight thing. So then they start going, oh, wait, these taxes are still hurting me. I need a deduction. Then they talk to their CPA. Then I'm getting a phone call. Well, isn't there any way to make this tax deductible? No, there's not. And you don't want it to be. Your money inside of here is going to grow tax-free. So leave it alone. I mean, unless you want to pay the taxes at the other end, you have to understand what's going on and make that decision for yourself. Here's what Nelson says about this in the next paragraph that I think is important because it's reminding you where all of this is coming from. He says, I remind you that the thing that caused all of this burden is the income tax law, which did not exist as we know it until 1913. And he goes on to say, and the world got along very well without it. Thank you very much. Well, why is he telling us this? He's reminding us that we've been born into this tax system. There's none of us alive that have been born before it, right? But dividend paying whole life insurance was born prior to that. It existed before and it largely sits outside of it. So if you want to get your money out of Willie Sutton's reach to the best of your ability, obviously there are some taxes we can't avoid, you might want to consider the magnificent idea of dividend paying whole life insurance. That's what he's about to tell us. And it's because it is not a government-sponsored idea. It is free people contracting together. It's private property. It comes with guarantees and access and control. And I don't know about you, but I like the sound of free people contracting together. I want to be one of those free people. No one is holding a gun to my head. It's private property. And I love guarantees. I love access, and I want to be in control of the money that I make. So that's where Nelson's going here with this at this last paragraph in this section. And I behooves you to read it. Well, we will. We will here in just a moment.
So if you were to briefly sum up the difference that Nelson is getting at here between the conventional system of qualified plans and the infinite banking concept, what would you say?
Oh, man. I would tell you that it is almost like the difference between two completely different worlds. That's why it's not just a little change over here and, oh, this can sit alongside this system and they can play nice together. No, let me just capture this a little bit for you. So in one world, I am dependent on the systems in place. I'm the passive host, shall we say. I could set it and forget it. That might be a pro. I don't have to be overly responsible. But I'm also not in control. My money, it may be moving somewhere in the background, but I don't have access to it when life happens. So when I need capital, I have to run back to the banks. I have to qualify. I have to ask permission. I have to accept their terms. I'm constantly dependent. All the while, my money is still subject to the powers that be. They make the rules. I obey them. Willie Sutton gets his due. And I have to just hope that it all works out in the end. But there's another world. And to me, I've been reading this to my grandchildren. So I was thinking about this recently. IBC feels almost like finding the wardrobe and stepping into Narnia. It's not an escape from responsibility, but it's an invitation to responsibility. And in this world, I do have to be diligent. I have to build capital little by little. I have to discipline myself. I have to overcome Parkinson's law. But with that responsibility comes something very different: control, access, liquidity, and most important of all, my favorite word, freedom. I'm no longer merely hoping that someone else's system works out in my favor. I'm building a system of my own. And yep, if I fail because I lack discipline, that's on me. But honestly, I would rather bear the weight of responsibility than live under the illusion of safety while somebody else holds the keys. And that's the difference Nelson is trying to get us to see. One world trains us to be passive, dependent, and hoping. The other calls us to be responsible, diligent, and free. And that's why it's not just about where we put our money. It's about who gets to control the money, who controls the banking function in our own lives. Instead of outsourcing it, we get to take it over. So, does that help?
Yeah, it was great.
That's my thinking, that it is two completely different worlds. So with that, Jonathan, let's wrap this up. Would you mind reading the very last paragraph of this chapter? Because honestly, nobody says it better than Nelson.
Absolutely. We all need to protect ourselves from the devastating effects of this monstrous idea outlined above. It just can't work, yet generation after generation keeps trying the same old nonsense. Economic problems are best solved by people freely contracting with one another and with government limited to the function of enforcing those contracts. And the best way to do so is through the magnificent idea of dividend-paying whole life insurance. It has been around for over 200 years. It has stood the test of time. It is not compulsory. It is not a government-sponsored idea. It preceded the income tax idea by a long time. It is private property, and only the people who care about others that are dear to them participate in the idea. What a great group of people to be associated with in business.
Wow. Like I said, nobody says it better than he does. I pray this episode awakens something in you and gives you great hope and a better way forward. It is not a government-sponsored idea. It preceded the income tax. It's private property. It is the way to freedom, plain and simple. And only the people who care about others who are dear to them participate in the idea. I mean, after all, who puts a lot of premium into a contract that's going to give you a death benefit to boot? To care about the next generation. All right, enough said. If this episode has given you a lot to think about, I'm very grateful. So don't hesitate to reach out if you want to learn more. You can find me at banklessbydesign.com. I would absolutely love to have a conversation with you and help you see how this could benefit you. Jonathan, thanks so much for being here today. It was great to have you with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we're done with the system and we're doing money differently. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs it, and visit us at banklessbydesign.com to learn how you can start living bankless by design.